So, good afternoon, everyone. When Barry asked me to talk about relationships, I thought, oh, Mother of Sweet Divine, what am I going to say about that? But so, if I may, I'm going to expand it a little and talk about relationships in the context of sharing our experiences and some of the challenges that we face on our scheme that may have some resonance with the other schemes. So I classify us as a very middle-of-the-road, average-sized scheme. We have just under 900 connections. Nearly half of them are non-domestic. We still don't have a source protection plan in place. We still don't have automatic meter readers. But I think we might be on a promise for a refill station soon. We're not big enough for full-time staff. The scheme is run by volunteers, a part-time manager, me, and caretakers as required. So once upon a time, you might remember that there was a hot summer in 2018, a distant memory now, but I had just been with Glencorrib for a month when that hit, and the scheme had already been carrying a lot of leaks, and the water demand was well above the members' usage, but overnight it just went out of control. And I remember just when I'd started, and I sat down with the former manager, and I thought, I asked him, what was I going to do? And he stood back, he looked at me and he stood back and he said, well, whatever you do, don't panic. And Johnny was a man now in his late 80s. He had run the scheme for free for nearly 30 years. And I knew looking at him that it was really just a new problem for a different day as far as he was concerned. I knew then that I was going to be dealing with a remarkably bizarre group of people, because here you had a group of people that were willing to head out in all weathers and take on any problem for little or no personal gain. Of course, Johnny was right. There was no point in panicking. And I knew then that what I needed to do really was to forge the relationships and find the information sources that we would need to solve our problems going forward. So what we did was we called a committee meeting and we put on our collective thinking cap. And I then tapped into the Federation, and I had, some of you might remember Paul Connolly. He was the development officer for our area at the time. And poor Paul, I had him on speed dial for months. And I have to, that's him there at the phone. And I have to say, he was so patient and supportive with me. And I'd rabbit on for a while, and then he'd say, okay, Fionnuala, right, what you need to do is, and it was invaluable, absolutely invaluable. And the local council really did have our backs as well. They did one very simple thing. They sent out one of their engineers, an engineer called Kathy Mellett, who has since left that department. And I sat down with Kathy and we just looked at the scheme and we divided up into our district metered areas. And that was just the starting point that we needed. Once we had that, we knew that we could start solving the problem. The other problem that we had was that there was just a few people on the scheme who knew the scheme inside out, but all of that information was in their heads. So at one of the first committee meetings, we posed one very simple question. What do we need to do so that I could run the scheme from day to day without having to bother the committee? As part of this, we needed to get to a stage where anyone could find any meter or any valve without having to ask. Now, we decided not to contract out this work because Jerry Tighe from Callow Lake, another manager, kindly showed us what they had done. So what we did then was, the next time we were reading the meters, we logged every meter's coordinates, we took a photograph of it, and we uploaded it onto Google Maps. And then the following year, we did the same with the valves, and we mapped in the mains. Again, these things are very obvious now, but at the time, without having the know-how and that information available to us and the manpower, that just would never have happened. One of the first things I noticed when I joined Glencorrib was that I would now be dealing with people of a range of life experiences and ages. And I have to say, I can only say good things about this. There was a wealth of experience and points of view just waiting to be shared. To my mind, this is a real strength of the cooperative structure. There are hundreds of people here today committed to their community and the resources of those communities. And it is laudable But I know for us, there is also a vulnerability about it because our rural community is changing, our social structure is changing, and our local environment is changing a lot. So I know that our current committee's main goal is to safeguard the scheme for the next generation. But they're also very busy in their daily lives. So our focus is to have a structure in place that will keep the water flowing, keep it safe to drink, without the task or burden of responsibility being too onerous on any one individual. The way we're managing this is by keeping everyone informed. We hold monthly committee meetings, and we also try and make sure that there is enough manpower available out on the ground. We start every meeting, we try to have it very focused, and we started by reporting on water demand for the month, the leakage for the month, water quality for the month, the work programme ahead and behind, and a financial report. That means for us that every committee member is kept completely up to date with operations. They also get their say in the decision making, and they are an extra pair of eyes out on the ground. The committee also decided that was too much of a burden for one caretaker. So the committee approached several people around the community, and 2 agreed to get involved. So what we did then was we trained them up as reserve caretakers. These now attend the monthly meetings, and they help with the meter readings, and they also help with the leak detection. So they are always ready to step in if there's a burst. And it means that the caretaker doesn't have to be on call 24/7 every day of the year anymore. Good relationships with the members takes input for us. Now, I would say that about 99% of our members are either supportive or indifferent. And we've kind of come to terms with the fact that we need to respect that indifference because most households on our schemes are already pretty overburdened. So for them to ask them to take on a lot of responsibility in a voluntary capacity is probably asking a lot. So we tend to take the intention not to ask favours, but rather to try and build goodwill and interest and invite participation without any pressure. So we try to have a subtle presence in our community. One of the ways we're doing that is that we have our office in the local community centre. This gives us a physical point of contact in the middle of the village, and it also helps to fund the local hall. Like many schemes, we run the All About Water programme in the 2 schools on the scheme, and we include a tour of the treatment plant and reservoir as part of it. We also tried offering work placements for the transitional year students, but have to say so far none of them have taken us up on it. Maybe next year. We haven't got a scheme vehicle, so the way we get around that is we all wear high-vis jackets with the scheme logo on it, so that when we are out on the network, we have a daily recognisable presence built up around the community. Now, there is still a handful who disagree with having to pay for or refuse to take responsibility for their leakage. Now, they are a handful, but they are there. And at the end of the day, the arrears have to be tackled. So we, like many schemes, I'm sure, have found ourselves in a situation where we have no option but to disconnect. The problem we find with that is that disconnecting a member can lead to a worse relationship going forward if they are reconnected. One of the things we now try to avoid that is to avoid large bills accruing that we know will be difficult to collect. That means that we have to remain pretty active on the ground with leak detection. And we find that if we do that, we have the dual outcome that we are building a better relationship on the ground and we're working on conservation. So it helps increase the scheme's presence on the ground, and it helps build a better rapport with the members, because instead of chasing payment for leaks, we then invoice the particular member for that leak detection couple of hours, and the scheme is perceived more positively. The other challenge we have been facing in the last couple of years is cost inflation. The everyday running costs for us has increased by about 30%. And the more technology that we're embracing, which we want to do, means that we are carrying a lot more annual fees than we used to. And we have also got a whole new layer of costs now that we're doing a lot more water quality monitoring. So these are new fees that we weren't carrying previously on top of the already escalating costs. For our scheme, being an employer and at our size and our level of activity, we are no longer able to stay within our subsidy limit. The increase in energy costs meant that we already had to increase the water charges, and we will probably have to look at increasing them again next year. Unfortunately, without more income, we will be in a situation where only the priorities will be carried out probably next year, and any ancillary activities like the work that we want to be doing in the communities will have to be postponed. And then there's the changing climate and water quality. This is perhaps the most challenging relationship to sustain into our future. Our water comes from a lake source, from which we are one of multiple abstractors. The water levels and temperatures are changing. There are more dissolved organics. The water is eutrophying. Now, we're very fortunate in that we're in a DBO contract, and we're lucky that we have a good working relationship with our operator, Glenua Limited. But both Glenua Limited and ourselves are now working in a situation of relative unknowns. And part of that is because the raw water data was limited and the climate modelling not as sophisticated when our contracts were being designed. And now, of course, we have to face the increased likelihood of the impacts from 1 in 100-year weather events. So for us, staying resilient has become crucial, which is the same as everyone is saying this today. That means more climate action studies, more upgrades, and continued investment. So our sentiment was one of gratitude and relief at the announcement of the 2024 to 26 Rural Water Programme. We're very grateful for our relationship with the Federation, the local council, the department, and we want to forge new relationships with the other stakeholders in our area. We rely on the sources of information and support to guide us and include us. We want to be included in decision making so that we can build this resilience and that we will be ready to deal with the changes so we will be able to future-proof our water supply. Thank you.